Welcome, welcome. Let everybody log in here real quick to yet another, hopefully very informative topic here today that we always get a lot of questions about, which is Social Security. And I'm gonna, as I normally do, vamp for a little bit because I know people are hopping on. But one disclaimer I wanted to say right at the top here is this presentation specifically is designed as it's titled to really dig into where Social Security might go. We're going to touch on a little bit of maybe one question you might have, which is, will Social Security be there? I've talked about that before. Yes, I do think it will be. But this presentation itself, this is the disclaimer, does not just start with what is Social Security? How does it work? Those things. I do get into some of that, but if there's something that I'm talking about and you're like, can you back up 1 second, Anthony? And hopefully I'll do a good job of just giving you the context that you need to understand the point I'm making. But if there's something like, hey, can you just go over this basic point one time? Please just put it in the chat for me to see. Hey, can you re-go through claiming ages again? We're going to talk about that a little bit. So just as a hypothetical. Because again, this is going to talk about things that are new for 2024, as well as things we should all be thinking about going forward. So there's my disclaimer. If there's a basic that I haven't hit, the reason for that, by the way, is we do a Social Security presentation once a year, and this one is a newer one. So I figured, well, we do have basics on our YouTube channel, which maybe, Aaron, we were just talking about if we link something, maybe you can link our YouTube channel for anybody who wants to go back and watch a previous Social Security topic. Those are all available on demand on our YouTube channel. Just Google Stein Financial Group YouTube. Aaron just linked it in the chat. So we are going to cover that basic info, but just this is not starting from a 101 level. Maybe this is your 102 or 201 class sort of thing. There's my disclaimer. Okay. Well, I think everybody's in here now, so let's go ahead and get started. Most of you, if not all of you, know me, but I put this on, we put this on. I shouldn't say Aaron really does most of the work with these presentations, so thank you to Aaron. We always put this slide in there just in case you're somebody who's either meeting us for the first time, or maybe you're not working with us actively. My name is Anthony Gerbi, a financial advisor with Stein Financial Group. There's our address. All my contact info, our group's contact info is going to be at the very end here. So stick around for that if you're curious. Okay. And disclosures, again, these are the same as always. What is some of the benchmarks we use, things like that. So here are the things we are going to talk about. I'll get out of the way here. Among other things, we're going to talk about even more than this, actually. But for those of you who are already on Social Security or are heading towards it, the 2024 cost of living adjustment obviously has come into effect. That's 3.2%. I'll explain what that is and how that works in just a couple slides here. The earnings test. So we're going to dig in a little bit deeper than I normally go on this, because one of the questions I do get from people is, first, Anthony, I didn't realize until somebody told me that I can take Social Security while I'm still working. And the answer is yes, you can do that. The question is it worth it for you to do that? All right. And that's what the earnings test is going to help us find out, because the earnings test can reduce your benefit if you're still working. So we'll go into exactly what that is. The status of Social Security, again, very common question, because people always hear the stats. Oh, isn't it set to run out of money by the end of the decade here? Well, no, it's not set to run out of money, but and I'll go into this in more detail. By 2034, there is a point that we need to correct from, or if we do nothing, things aren't looking as good by 2034. But it's not that we'll run out of money. I'll get into that. And then finally, claiming strategies. Now, this is where most of you are going to really find something that, well, I think a lot of this applies to you, but this is the meat and potatoes of Social Security. The nice thing about Social Security, I was thinking about this morning, is unlike so many of the other things that I do presentations on or talk about, Medicare, even for example, a lot of other financial topics are really so specifically individual to your situation that I can give you the broad strokes, and then I have to say at the end, well, let's talk one-on-one to see what fits for you. The nice thing about Social Security is it's very standard. Now, everybody on this call is getting a different amount because we paid in a different amount. One person here may claim as soon as possible, which is age 62. Another person may claim at 70, but both on this same call. So yes, there are differences. But I know for a fact that all of us on this call have Social Security. Or I guess if you immigrated recently, you may be on your way to getting Social Security. That would be potentially a way that you don't. But it's a very standard thing, and that allows me to get a little more specific. So that's a real positive for us today. So let's talk about the cost of living adjustment. All right. And what that is going to be talking about is how much are our checks going up in a given month, right? So checks are going up in 2024. We're also going to talk about the earnings threshold, and let me get out of the way, and benefit basis. So this is based on the 3.2% cost of living adjustment. So let me back up a second. What is the cost of living adjustment, right? That is the amount that if you're already receiving Social Security, your benefit goes up. Now, we all maybe remember the one from a couple years ago that was up 8% because inflation was so high. This year's was 3.2%, which is pretty healthy overall. But you can see, so if you were getting $800 a month, you get a $26 a month benefit. And if you were getting $4,000 a month, which would be basically the maximum, you get a bump of $128 a month, right? And obviously that's just doing the math of 3.2%. One thing, I'm going to skip one ahead actually, because I was just going to talk about this. One thing that a lot of people don't know is that unclaimed, I'm going to go over to the right because this is the box that I want to talk about. Unclaimed benefits are also raised by cost of living adjustments. So, to put this in context with a concrete example, I had people who asked us, hey, I heard this was for the year that the benefits went up by 8% for the cost of living adjustment. The people asked, should I take my Social Security now to get access to that 8% buff? That seems like a pretty good incentive to turn this benefit on, right? And the answer is you get it whether you turn it on or not. So if you are between age 62 and 70, your benefit gets the cost of living adjustment even if you haven't applied for it yet. And a lot of people don't realize that until they look deeper at the numbers. So not only does your benefit automatically go up every year you wait, regardless of what the cost of living adjustment is, it goes up also with the cost of living adjustment. So don't worry, people who didn't apply when the cost of living adjustment was 8%, but could have. You still get that bump in your check when you do eventually apply for Social Security. So that's one thing that is not as well publicized, but I really think is important to talk about. What this is referring to the left side of the screen, and then that bottom box, left, I guess, would be over there, is the cost of living adjustment is based on inflation, but it is imperfect. And if you go to the Social Security's website or you read a financial article, they will tell you that the cost of living adjustment goes up every year. And this is one of those things that's technically true, but is not really true. Because look at this chart. Now, this is how the cost of living adjustment's gone every year. 2023 was the 8.7 again. So that was just last year. And then it was 6% almost in 2022. So again, nice, healthy numbers. But look at 2016, look at 2011 and 2010. Those were all at 0%. And like I just said, if you Google this, does the cost of living adjustment happen every year? They will tell you, yes, it does. So how can that be? How can there be a 0% increase, but they claim the cost of living adjustment still happens? This is my pet peeve, as you could tell. The reason they can claim that, and they are technically correct, they're not lying, it's sort of misleading in my opinion, is those years did not have high enough inflation to actually register a cost of living increase. In other words, the index that they use to track the cost of living increases around the country did not go up themselves So they didn't transfer or pass anything on to us or anyone who's, I'm not receiving Social Security yet, but to people who were or people who were eligible. And that is, in my opinion, that now I'm putting my economics hat on from school. The measure that they use, I'm not going to get really into the weeds, so trust me. If you're already starting to eyes glaze over when I mention economics, I'm not going to draw a graph, I promise. But the measure that they use for inflation is far from perfect. They would even admit that. There is really no perfect measure of inflation, as you might expect. But the problem is when that metric doesn't show an increase, they don't give anybody an increase in Social Security, even though that's not to say there was no inflation in 2016, 2011, 2012, or excuse me, 2010, 2011. Things did go up in price. Things go up in price every year, just different things. Or maybe it wasn't as much as normal, fair enough. But it's not true that you're going to guaranteed get a bump in your benefits every year, even though they kind of like you to think that you would. It depends on what inflation actually runs. And if inflation doesn't run high, you don't get a bump. Now, you might say, well, and that's okay. I understand if things don't go up in price very much or at all. I understand why I don't get a bump. And yeah, it does make sense on paper. But in essence, they're only saying that inflation doesn't go up because of their index not going up. Well, their index is, again, far from perfect. So, all that being said, it definitely, I do expect cost of living adjustments to happen going forward. I'm not saying don't count on them per se. I'm just saying don't be surprised if they're low or maybe they don't quite keep up with the cost of living acceleration that we all experience. By the way, at the bottom there, a lot of people ask this question. Historically, and this based on these numbers, you get about a 2.6% raise per year, right? And that's what the historical number's been. Going forward, they're projecting a little bit lower at 2.4%. By the way, when we run financial plans, we're projecting about 2%. So we're trying to be even more conservative than the trustees of Social Security are. Anyway, there's my soapbox little topic. Hopefully you found that somewhat interesting, not too boring. So you don't necessarily get a raise every year, even though they'll try to tell you you will. Okay, what is this earnings test? So this is a test, quote unquote, that they run, and they being the Social Security Administration, runs against your income if you are these three things. You are working, number one. You are under your full retirement age, number two, and we'll talk about what that is. That's what FRA means in that first little arrow bullet point there. And number three, you are claiming Social Security now. So you're working, you're taking Social Security, and you're under full retirement age. All three of those things have to be true for this earnings test to apply. So if only two of those are true, you don't need to worry about this. If you are working, but you're over your full retirement age and you're claiming Social Security, no earnings test. You can earn your full Social Security check. If you are obviously not taking Social Security, then this is a moot point. So that's the other one. And if you're not working, then you don't need to worry about this. But what is this? Okay. When you work while you are taking Social Security and you're under your full retirement age, and we're going to get to exactly, in fact, maybe I should jump ahead so that we can talk. It talks about your full retirement age in a couple slides here. Let me just tell you that right now, because there's a way. I missed it. Here we go. Look at number two right here. I skipped ahead because this is where you can figure out your full retirement age. Some of you may know it off the top of your head, but just in case you don't, if you were born before 1943, your full retirement age was 66. Now, again, if you're born before then, you're probably already on Social Security. If you were born between 1955, excuse me, so from 1955 to 1959, your full retirement age is 66 and an even number of months. So let me say this again. If you were born in 1955, your full retirement age is 66 and 2 months. If you were born in 1956, it's 56, it's 66 and 4 months. If you were born in 1957, it's 66 and 6 months. If you were born in 1958, it's 66 and 8 months, and so on every 2 months up until anybody born after 1960, age 67 is your full retirement age. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. You might say, why do I need to care about my full retirement age? It's just the age at which you get your quote unquote full benefits. That's the most meaningful thing about it. It's also the age at which this earnings test doesn't apply anymore. All right. So, and again, if I went too fast there and you're like, hey, can you say that again? Or can you tell me what my full retirement age you know how old I am? Happy to do that. It's not hard to do. You just kind of have to see it once to get used to it. And I see it a lot. So that's why I'm used to it. Okay. So if you're under that full retirement age and you earn income from a job, so pensions don't count here. It's job income, right? So if you're earning income from a job, your threshold is $22,320. What does that mean? Every dollar you earn in income from a job over $22,320 reduces your Social Security benefit. And the way the formula works is they withhold $1 of benefit for every $2 you earn over 22,000. Now they've added, this is new in 2024, if you are receiving benefits, this is the last bullet point, and turn full retirement age in 2024, $1 will be withheld for every $3 earned over 60,000. Okay. The numbers are the numbers. I think it's good to know where they stand. These are, especially before full retirement age, these are low bars. So what does all this mean? I just told you all the underpinnings of it. Maybe I should have started with the grand finale first. If you are still working, it probably does not make sense to take Social Security. All right. Because if you earn over $22,000, you're going to get less from your benefit than you would if you weren't working. They reduce it. Now, it does go back up the next year if then you retire the next year, but why not just wait until the next year? I mean, for people who are earning 60,000 bucks and they're under their full retirement age, that wipes out pretty much your whole Social Security benefit anyway, to the point where you should have just waited to turn it on in the first place. So the first thing people say when they learn, oh, I can work while I'm taking Social Security, absolutely you can. Should you do that though? If you're under your full retirement age, probably not, unless there's a really specific situation that really makes it a necessity for you. I would highly recommend we at least talk about it, obviously. But for people who are still working and you're under that full retirement age, almost certainly it's not going to be in your financial interest to take Social Security while you're still working. Once you're over that full retirement age, then it's a different conversation because then there's no reduction. Then you just get your full check. They don't worry about what you make anymore. Then there might be a higher incentive. But while you're working and under that age, that's the point I want to drive home, probably doesn't make sense. Very few cases would it make sense to do. So hopefully that was somewhat clear. That's one of the more complicated topics we're going to get into. So if you stuck with me through that, you're in great shape. Okay, so there is such a thing as your first year monthly earnings test. I'm not even going to get into this too deep because I don't want to get any more into the weeds than I already have been. Just know, again, if you are under your full retirement age, still working, and you want to turn on Social Security, you could get your benefits reduced for just that year. And then that might make it not worth it to turn on your Social Security in the first place. All right, fair enough. So what is the outlook? This is what some of you are, your eyes are probably lighting up. Ooh, I always want to hear about this. Are we really, is everybody screwed here with Social Security? And some of you might say, it seems like it always works out. And I am very much in the camp of it's going to work out. But just to put some numbers to it, don't write these down. Please don't write these down. I don't commit these to memory at all. So the Social Security Trust Fund, the balance on December 31st, 2022 was $2.8 trillion. And okay, that's like monopoly money. What does that mean? How much are they doing? The thing we need to pay attention to is the fact that in 2023, the expenditures, so the payouts that Social Security did, was $1.392 trillion, and the income was only 1.351 trillion. Only. We're talking about $1 trillion here. Unfathomable amounts of money in this trust fund. But that's a deficit, right? We spent more than we brought in. That's a problem long term, right? We're going to deplete this trust fund balance if we have a net decrease of $41 billion a year or thereabouts. So how do we fix this? What does that mean? Well, here's the number that the news always tries to scare you with. Don't worry about this graph. Don't worry about any of this, in my opinion, but I want to be transparent about it. Without reform, benefits could fall to 80% of what people are currently receiving in 2034. Okay, let me read that again. Without reform, benefits could fall to 80% of their current totals in 2034. Okay, there's three things going on in that sentence, right? First off, 2034. We've got 10 years before this is even potentially a problem. I guess you could say, well, it's a problem that we're only 10 years away from it. I don't disagree with that. But we can go like we're going for at least the next 10 years, even if we just bury our head in the sand and don't do a thing about it. All right. Secondly, 80%, right? And I don't think this is going to happen. But look at the graph here. We could still fund 75 or 74, if you want to be specific, percent of benefits until 2097 without lifting a finger to do so. So when they tell you that Social Security is going to go broke in 10 years, it's not going broke. It's just the fact that it's not going to be able to fund 100% of what they project the benefits to be. That is a problem. I'm not trying to gloss over that. But it's not that, well, everybody's just going to be out of money. They're going to have to, the whole thing's going to go bankrupt. Not the case. All right. Then the last one, which is the first part of the sentence, is by far the most important. This is what if we do nothing? This is we are stepping on the accelerator pedal in a sports car, driving at a brick wall, and our hands are off the steering wheel, our eyes are closed, and we don't have a care in the world about it. And I know what you're thinking, which is, doesn't Congress have to be the ones to do this? And I don't really have I don't really feel great about their ability to swerve and miss that brick wall. Okay, I'll give you that. That's fair. They don't have a good track record of really making reforms when they're needed to. But I do believe that we will swerve here. There is too much at stake. I've used this line many, many times for people, and you've probably heard me say it before. But Congress could do things to kick the can further down the road without cutting benefits to anybody receiving or anybody who's even over the age of 18 right now. Okay. And what do I mean by that? I mean, they could cut benefits for people who aren't even born yet. And that would help make this thing more solvent. And why would they cut benefits for people who aren't born? Because people who aren't born or who are under 18 even can't vote. Right. And that's what the congressional leaders, I guess, if you want to call them that, are concerned about, keeping their jobs. Cutting Social Security benefits or letting Social Security be decreased because they fail to do something is a sure way to lose votes the next election cycle. So I'm going off purely self-interest as the principle that motivates them here to get something done. That's why I believe it will happen. And that's a very cynical take. I believe the cynical take here is the right one. So what are the things we could do? So again, I said with that chart I just showed you shows what happens if we don't veer around the brick wall. What if we do? What are the things we could do to make this happen? Well, one of the things that has actually been talked about pretty significantly is right now you max out at how much you have to pay into Social Security at $168,000 of income. Now that covers most, if not all of us on this call, but there's a lot of people in this world who are making millions of dollars now, or I guess in this country is what matters for this conversation. But, CEOs, there are many, many people who are doing very well. And I'm not saying we punish them for doing well, but why don't we expand that minimum to cover a higher salary band, and that would increase money in the door right away? That is one that I could see getting through at some point, by the way, in terms of how realistic these things are. There's not necessarily a bill working its way through right now. We are going to talk about a bill that is in Congress. I'm not optimistic about it, but I'll bring it up here in a second. But that's one thing we could do. right now, if you earn more than $168,000 in this country, your Social Security pay in is capped there, or it's you're at the maximum level. What if we just raise that? People making 250,000, maybe go all the way up to 1 million. All that stuff is within our power to do, or within, I guess, Congress's power to do. You could raise the minimum retirement age. Again, this was number 2 that we looked at before to determine your full retirement age, but raise the normal retirement age. What if they made the minimum age that you could get Social Security 65 instead of 62? What if they raised your full retirement age from 67 to 70? Those things would kick the can down the road, and therefore I see them as more likely. Again, nobody on this call, I don't even think that'll happen for me and or anybody on this call. I don't think your benefits are going to get touched. I don't think your timing or your age is going to change, at least not significantly, would be my projection. But for younger people, maybe people, again, who aren't born or who are under 18, I think it will change at some point, because that's an easy solution that, again, probably doesn't cost people votes. Lower benefits for future retirees. That's kind of along the lines of what I just alluded to. Instead of raising ages, they could just cut benefits. I guess you could say those two things are equivalent, but I think it's more palatable to raise an age limit versus cutting benefits. And maybe that's just in my head, that makes more sense. Again, they're going to do whatever they think will lose them the least amount of votes by cutting this. But again, I highly doubt they're going to cut benefits for people who are currently receiving, who are about to receive, or even realistically are within 20 or 30 years of receiving. And then lastly, they could reduce the amount of adjustment we get per year for inflation, the cost of living adjustments we've already talked about. That's an option, of course. I find that to be unlikely, because the amount of people out there whose Social Security is not just their primary source of income, but their only source of income, they depend on those cost of living adjustments to stay, in a lot of cases, out of even poverty. And I just think that would be a really unpalatable move for a lot of people. So again, I'm reading my own kind of read on the situation into it. Nobody knows what's going to happen. I'm not trying to pretend that I do, but I do believe that we will swerve and miss the cliff that we're sort of headed towards here. And I've been consistent on that all the way through. So will Congress address Social Security this year? I'll talk about this bill. I'm not going to read the bill to you and what it all entails, because A, I don't think it's going to pass. It's an election year anyway. But B, it's going to take a coalition of people. It's not just going to take one party being in power and pushing it through. I think it's going to take a bipartisan thing, which obviously we know is fraught with so many pitfalls these days. But there is an act in Congress right now, was introduced by a congressperson from Connecticut, and it may come to a vote this year. I'm not optimistic about it, that it will pass. Not that it's not a good bill, just that I'm not optimistic that it'll pass. But it would restore full solvency without affecting benefits for current retirees. And the 2100 in that act means it would restore solvency until 2100. I wouldn't think about this too much unless something changes and we really find out, wow, this is actually closer to reality than we think. I don't think that's going to pass, but I just wanted to show there are people thinking about this. I think the impression sometimes is that Congress is like, 10 years from now, great, we'll worry about it 9 years from now, sort of deal. And there's a lot of truth to that. But there are people out there who are trying to think about this proactively. And again, I do think something will get done eventually. It's not a current priority in Congress, and the reason it's not a current priority is the benefits aren't in imminent danger, and that always makes a difference. Is this thing about to blow up, or do we have 10 years until it blows up? And again, blow up is sort of an inflammatory word. We already talked about that, but this Congress, and not even this Congress, I mean, because this Congress should really be said to be, well, this session of Congress, I mean, just Congress in general going forward. They usually have, or the recent track record is, they don't make things a priority until they're about to blow up. I think that's more true than not in this case too. So we're going to talk about claiming strategies here. And this is where we're going to get into some actionable stuff. I've given you some definitions. I've given you some timelines, that sort of thing. Let's talk about what you can actually do with Social Security. So I'm not even going to spend much time on this. You may be familiar with the terminology file and suspend. Perhaps some of you on this call even were able to take advantage of this. What I want those of you who don't know what this is, or certainly those of you who are not on Social Security yet, this went away. So this was a great loophole that allowed people to sort of claim on each other's benefits, a married couple, and then swap and get the best of both worlds. They closed this loophole in 2016. For those of you who don't know what it is, I'm sorry, because it would have been great, but Congress closed this loophole. You can't do it anymore. I bring it up only because we get questions about it a lot. Hey, I heard, my neighbor said they did this file and suspend thing and it was so smart and they made so much extra money. Yeah, they probably did, but it's not available anymore, unfortunately. We do have some people we work with who were able to take advantage of it. They were the right age at the right time before this loophole was closed, but it has been closed for a while now. Secondly, claim now, claim more later. So filing for your spousal benefit and then filing for your personal benefit is what this is referring for. Nobody can do it anymore. This sentence right here is phrased in a weird way. Everyone who was able to do it when the law changed is now over 70 anyway, so you would have already applied for your Social Security. So again, I bring this up not because you need to know what this is. It's just if you want to ask me about that, feel free to ask me, as always. But no, there aren't any more of these loopholes where we can do one thing and then do another thing. And I heard that's a really smart way to do it. They closed all those loopholes, unfortunately. So enough time spent on that. But this is then something that you can do, has been around for a long time, and a lot of people don't realize it. So if you are married, you as a spouse can claim a spousal benefit based on your spouse's personal Social Security. When would you want to do that? You would want to do that if half of your spouse's benefit is more than your benefit. All right, let me say that again. You are entitled to half of your spouse's benefit as a spousal benefit. You only want to do that if it's better to take half of theirs than it is yours. All right, so let me give you a concrete example. Spouse one, let's call her Ann. I'm going to use Ann and Bob. Ann's Social Security is $40,000 a year. All right. And Bob's is $15,000 a year. Well, Bob, since they're married, is eligible for 50% of Ann's benefit, which 50% of 40,000 is 20,000. Bob would be better off taking his spousal benefit than his own personal benefit because he's eligible for 50%. Now, disclaimer, you got to be full retirement age to do this. Or you don't have to be, but if you file before full retirement age, your benefit is reduced, just like your normal benefit is reduced. Your spousal benefit gets reduced by the same proportion. So that might not be an incentive. By the way, you cannot, and this is what the last slide was getting at, you cannot file for only your spousal benefit anymore. You used to be able to do that. You have to file for both at the same time. So if you file for one, you're filing for the other, and you're just going to take the higher of the two. Also, the spouse with the higher benefit has to be taking that benefit currently. That's another thing, because you may look at it and say, well, their benefit is more than double mine, so I'd be smart to take it, but they're going to wait until age 70 to take theirs. No, they have to be taking it for you to be eligible to take your spousal benefit. And there's no delayed credits anymore. I'm not even going to go into that because it just doesn't exist anymore. So I don't need to tell you about something you can't do more than I already have. So we need to be thinking about that. And I try to ask everybody as we're having these Social Security conversations, okay, what's your spouse's Social Security? And a lot of times they're very close to the same. And if so, then you're both going to take your personal benefit, and that's that. But if there is a big discrepancy, it does probably make sense to take a spousal benefit. Now, I want to talk about something else that's not on the screen, but it's something that I don't get asked about a lot, but arguably I should get asked about it more, which is Social Security death and survivor benefits. There's even a slide about this, but it's really, I want to cover something very specific right here, which is when a married couple, when the first part of that couple, the first person of that couple passes away, the survivor keeps the higher of the two Social Security payments, right? Not both. I get a lot of people who think, well, we just keep both Social Securities, kind of like we would with our pension. You keep the higher of the two. So, first off, good thing to know ahead of time. Second off, if there is a big discrepancy between two spouses, so one spouse's Social Security is way higher than the other one, maybe even high enough that the other one should be taking the spousal benefit, right? It might be in the couple's best financial interest for the spouse with the higher benefit, the much higher benefit, to take their Social Security later and maximize that benefit by taking it at age 70. So let me, again, paint a picture. This is somewhat, well, I'm not even going to say somewhat realistic. This is totally realistic. Let's say we've got a man and a woman, and I bring up gender in this case because men tend to not live as long as women. And not only is it a man and a woman, but there's an age gap. Let's say 5 years. The man's 5 years older than the woman. And the man's Social Security in this example is much higher than the woman's. Again, reverse everything still holds true, but this is just going to be paint the picture I want to paint. So 5 years older, much bigger benefit, also gender difference in life expectancy. In that case, it might make sense for the wife in this example to take her benefit sooner, even though it's a smaller amount, and let the husband's grow to the maximum possible amount at age 70. Why would we do that? Well, the question I get often is, well, if I wait till 70, don't I have to live a long time to make it worth it to have not taken my benefit earlier? Yes, that's true. But remember, your spouse then keeps the higher of the two benefits. So for the household, even if you might not live long enough to make it worth it for you personally, you're maximizing income for the long term for both of your lives by making the higher benefit of the two, waiting as long as you can and getting that to as big of a number as you can possibly get it to. So hopefully that makes sense. What I'm saying is, if you have a big disparity in benefits between a couple, especially if the person who's older and potentially male has the higher benefit, the much higher benefit, it could make sense for that person to really wait as long as possible until age 70 to claim their benefit, because then that's the benefit that sticks with the surviving spouse for the rest of their lifetime too. So I hope that makes sense. Again, I brought in a more specific example because I think that helps illustrate it, but it has nothing to do with you only have to be married to take advantage of this. You don't have to be, it doesn't matter if it's the man or the woman that has the higher amount. If the woman's much older, then life expectancy might say that she's more likely to go first. I'm just playing the statistics here in that example. Okay, so it's in one of these cases because we're going to talk about death benefits and a couple other things. So here's a couple questions to ask yourself. Could this be you? A married person who never added on her spousal benefit after her husband filed for his benefit. Again, reverse genders has nothing to do with man, woman here. That's just the example that they put in. So don't forget you have a spousal benefit. And I'm going to go to the next slide. We already just talked about spousal benefits. Did you know that you can claim benefits off of your ex-spouse if that applies to you? A lot of people don't know that. You have to have been married for 10 years for this to apply, and you can't be remarried. If you're remarried, then you're going to just claim it off your current spouse, obviously. But if you were married for more than 10 years, got divorced, and didn't remarry, you are entitled to half of your ex-spouse's Social Security, just like you would be if you were still married. The next question when I tell people that, if this applies to you, is do they know that I'm doing this? Because, I just don't want to deal with that headache. Does it reduce their benefit in any way? No, it doesn't reduce their benefit. Some of you might be saying, oh, I wish it did, but it doesn't. And they don't know about it. You don't have to ask their permission. They don't get notified and have to agree to it. It's totally your right to do it. So for those of you, or in some cases, those of you who may know people who this situation applies to, don't forget about it because it can make a difference. Maybe half of an ex-spouse's benefit is bigger than your benefit, and it would be in your interest to apply for it then. So know that that's an option. A divorced person, so let me read this scenario and then we'll talk about it. Could this be you? A divorced person whose ex-spouse is now deceased making her eligible for a survivor benefit that is higher than her own benefit. Again, you have to be married for 10 years for this. Did you know that if your spouse or ex-spouse passes away, you could be eligible for survivor benefits based off them? Okay. So again, for those of you who didn't know about this, it's an important thing to keep in your mind, especially if it applies to you or again applies to someone you know. One thing that I don't think, yeah, it doesn't talk about here, but now I want to do a digression into this. This only affects a certain amount of people, what I'm about to say. But for those it does, it's hugely impactful. If you are on Social Security or your Social Security age, you can, if you have a child who is under 18. All right. So you have to be in your 60s then to be eligible for Social Security, and you have a child who's under 18. They can collect Social Security benefits on your record. They just get a check. It doesn't reduce yours. They can just get a check until they turn 18. If they are disabled, it can go even more than that. It can go even higher than that. And if you are disabled, you can get Social Security benefits earlier, not just disability benefits, but your actual Social Security benefits earlier too. I bring this up, I'm throwing a lot of different scenarios at you. My point in throwing these scenarios at you is if any one of you are like, ooh, ping, that sounds like me, then we should be talking about that. And secondly, I bring it up because you may know people and you don't need to know what the answers are. I'm not asking you to memorize all this stuff, believe me. But what you need to know is, ooh, okay, that scenario sounds familiar to what Anthony threw out there. We should talk to somebody to make sure we're really thinking about this in the right way. Talking to me would be a great start if you have questions about this. So I'm throwing out these scenarios not so that you remember what the answers are. I mean, it's great if you do, but more so that you can kind of store that scenario in your head and be like, oh, yeah, there is a thing with ex-spouses in Social Security. I should ask somebody about that. I should ask Anthony about that. Oh, there is a thing with if my ex-spouse deceased or even my current spouse dies, passes away, about what happens to my Social Security. I should be asking Anthony about that. If I have a child, unfortunately, grandchildren don't count, but a first generation child that is under 18 while I'm taking Social Security, I should be asking Anthony about that. If there's a disability, and again, this could apply to you, this could apply to your kids down the road. Again, anybody you know, obviously this applies to. This is the going back to what I said at the very beginning here. This is the best part of Social Security. I can tell you all this stuff because it applies to all of us equally. Our dollar values are different, but the rules apply to all of us equally. So those are a couple scenarios I could throw at you. Those are things that people often miss. All right. The ex-spouse part, people often miss. The benefits for minor children, people often miss. And that's just money that's in your pocket. I'm not going to say it's free money because, of course, it's part of your benefit that you paid in on. But there are opportunities there that a lot of people aren't aware of because they think of Social Security as just, well, I paid in and I get a check later based on how much I paid in. Yeah, that is what it is, but there's more to it than that, I guess is what I would say. So, what can I help you with? I mean, we all have talked about this, or hopefully we have. And if we haven't in a while, we should probably retouch base on it, which is identifying any benefits that you may not be aware of. Again, the ex-spouse is one, the minor child is another, disability stuff, all that stuff would be extra benefits potentially that we should at least make sure and rule out that they're not available for you before we move on anyway. And then when should you take Social Security, right? There are pros and there are cons. We just had a tax event last month that we talked about Social Security and taxes a bit there. You can check our YouTube page, which Aaron linked for a replay of that. But that's another piece of the equation. How do we manage your tax situation throughout your retirement so that Social Security comes in at the exact right time? For a lot of you on this call, we're going to be able to have you retire, or maybe you already have retired. A lot of you already have. Live off of your pension plus your deferred comp and wait on Social Security until later. Oftentimes, that's a really great strategy, at least for, again, one person in the relationship, because the person with the higher benefit may want to maximize it because it outlives you. It'll go to your spouse if you die first. And then finally, see how Social Security fits in the rest of your retirement income plan. I just kind of talked about that in terms of how do we coordinate that with your deferred comp, with your para, if you're fortunate enough to have that, or any other assets that you have. So it's too important for guesswork. Let us help you. This is our contact information. Most of you have this already. I'll leave it up there on the screen. I'm totally open to take questions. Right here, if there was anything you wanted me to touch on that I haven't yet. But I want to encourage everybody in here as we continue to talk, or especially if you haven't talked to us recently, this is something we can help you with. We can run scenarios. I can tell you, by the way, if you give me your estimate of your Social Security dollars, how long you have to live in order to make it worth it to wait. Right. So if you take at 62, you get a lower dollar amount, but you get it for more years, right? You get it for versus age 70, 8 more years. But at age 70, you get over, I believe it's about 130% of your age 62 benefit. So it doubles. So when does that crossover point happen? How long do you have to live? It's usually about 79, age 79 or 80, by the way, for most people. So if you think you've got a decent shot to live till 80, you might be better off waiting till Social Security. I say maybe because, again, it depends on your circumstances there. But we can have a conversation about that. When should you take it? Are there any benefits that you're not aware that you're eligible for that we can kind of check for you? That's a great thing for us to talk about. If you were married before, that's a great thing for me to know, because then I can say, oh, do we know about your ex-spouse's benefits? Let's ask Social Security about that and see if that's in your best interest to take your spousal benefit. All that stuff is super important. So we've gotten to the end of my content here. Again, please, there's a chat, there's a Q&A feature. You can raise your hand and we can unmute you if you've got questions. Please start typing them in the chat. I will keep talking a little bit here, but I hope this was informative. The things I want you to take away from this, by the way, are, if I go back to our summary at the very beginning, how much is your check going up this year and why does it happen and how does that work and will it happen going forward? Yes, I do think checks will continue to get bigger. Should I take Social Security while I'm still working? For a lot of you, probably not at this point. All right. So maybe you were already on that page, but that's a very common question we get. Should I take Social Security? I'm still working. Probably not, although we can definitely have a more in-depth conversation about it related to you. What's Social Security going to be like going forward? Again, hopefully that made you feel a little more optimistic about it, that we are going to be able to come to a solution as a country here and figure out how to fund this thing. I think there are some levers to pull that could get us way further into the future without having any financial issues there. So it makes me feel more optimistic to look at that stuff because the numbers actually start to make sense. And we're not in as dire a situation as I think the media would lead us to believe. And lastly, there's just some things you need to know about the periphery of Social Security: spousal benefits, ex-spousal benefits, children's benefits, survivor benefits. All that stuff is baked in and is not necessarily well known publicly. We can help you figure all that stuff out. So I'll go back to our contact page. If anybody has questions, type them in the chat. Send me an email afterwards. That's totally fine too. My email's up there as well as our main office email. But I'll hang out here for a little bit. But if you're good, then feel free to hop off here. We really appreciate your time. I will, and I see there's a hand raised, so I'll get to that. I do want to, before other people hop off, we are doing another event next month and the month after and the month after. This is not set in stone yet, but I believe it will be about long-term care specifically. So we're putting that together right now. You'll get invites just like you got to this. So that's a little promo for June here. You'll hear more about it. Okay. See, there's a hand raise. All right, Randy, you should be able to unmute right now.
Can you hear me? Okay.
All right. There we go. I can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you too. The question I had was when you were talking about the Social Security fund dropping below the expenditures, dropping below the income. do those figures include calculating the cost of living until 2036?
Yes. Yes, they do. So there's a prediction about what those are going to be. Obviously, we don't know what the cost of living adjustments are going to be, so they have to use averages.
Mhm.
So it's not going to be perfect as far as the projection goes, but yes, they are taking into account cost of living adjustments. So that makes it slightly more accurate, which is good. We want it to be as accurate as we can possibly get it. Was that the only question? Did you have other questions,
That
Randy?
was the only question I had.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'll mute you again. And then I did get in the Q&A, will my Minnesota para pension affect my Social Security benefit? Okay, this is something I didn't talk about on the presentation. It starts to freak people out. So for the person who asked this question, I won't say your name out loud because I can see it, but I don't think anybody else can. No, it's not going to affect yours. And I'm talking to you specifically, Tim, who asked the question. It won't affect yours. There is such a thing, and people freak out when I say this. So when I say this, don't freak out. I'll explain it. There is such a thing as a reduced Social Security benefit because of what they call the windfall provision for some public employee pensions. All right. And when I say that, and I've said this in other presentations, I usually get a bunch of questions, whether it's in the presentation or afterwards, say, hey, does that apply to me? You said that, and that freaked me out for a second. If it applied to you, you would know about it. I just talked to somebody yesterday who it does apply to, and I was telling him that I was doing this presentation today, and I was like, yeah, I'll bring up the fact that some people with pensions have reduced Social Security, and there'll always be 3 or 4 people who have a little moment of internal panic and be like, oh my gosh, is that me? Did I not think about that? If you don't know about that, it doesn't affect you. All right. You would know about it if it did. And what is that? If for certain jobs, they were not required to pay Social Security tax, they just put that money into a pension. And these are public jobs I'm talking about. You see it most commonly with police and fire, but it's not exclusive to them. Police officers and fire department, fire people, I guess now. So there, it is possible. There are people we work with who don't have their full Social Security benefit. Now they have a bigger pension as a trade-off, so it really didn't cost them necessarily anything. It's just a different situation. But the answer to the question that you had, Tim, was no, it's not going to affect yours. For some people, it might, but again, you will know if you're one of those people. We can talk about it if you're still not sure. If you want me to tell you for sure, I'm very happy to. All I need to do is look at your para statement, and I can tell whether you're part of or your Social Security statement actually, and I'll be able to tell. Actually, I think your para statement even says it too. So either one, but I can look and tell you in 5 seconds whether it's you. But don't worry, people who just, it's okay to have that little internal moment of panic. Wait, there's people with reduced Social Security. Wait, is that me? Did I screw up? Nope, you didn't screw up. It's totally fine. And if you don't know about it, then I can almost assure you with certainty that you don't have reduced Social Security. So great question. You reminded me of something I was going to bring up and didn't yet. But the answer, short answer to you, Tim, is no, will not affect it. Let's see if there's any other questions. Feel free to hop off. It's rare that I go under an hour for a presentation, so I think we should all buy lottery tickets. Just kidding. I'm a financial advisor. I need to remember that. But no, so take your 7 minutes back here if you don't have any other questions. Otherwise, I'll stick around for just a little bit in case some people are still typing. Looks like we have another raised hand. Okay. All right. Gloria, you should be able to unmute now.
Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yep, I can.
Okay. On your, this last year, I had my UCare payments, my health care taken out of my Social Security.
Yes.
So how does that affect income as far as recording it for taxes? Does that decrease or?
No, unfortunately, it doesn't. So it's still your Social Security. It's just they're paying your bill automatically for you of your Medicare. So what, for those who don't know, what Gloria is referring to is you have the option of paying your Part B of Medicare premium. Actually, it's not even an option. They do it automatically. Medicare premium out of your Social Security check. And that also applies for, as Gloria, you were just saying, if you sign up for what they call a Medicare Advantage plan, meaning you go above and beyond normal Medicare Part B. And so that premium gets taken right out of your Social Security check. It's nice, it's convenient. Of course, it reduces your Social Security amount, so we need to remember that as we're projecting values here. But it is still income to you. So it's not like they just reduce your benefit and call it a wash. You're paying your premium, it's just automatically deducted, I guess is the way I would put it. That actually leads me to another point that I didn't bring up, which specifically is on taxes. When you sign up for Social Security, don't forget to have them withhold taxes for you. I have a lot of people who have made that mistake and then they get surprised with a nasty tax bill when they file that first year. You have to tell them to withhold taxes. They don't just do it automatically. So it's not hard to do, but just remember that when you're signing up. Yep, I got to withhold taxes from this thing. So did that answer your question, Gloria?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And we'll be following up with everybody as we always do. Again, if you have a specific question that you don't want to ask in front of the group, maybe totally fine. I'll go back to our contact information. Again, most of you probably have it already, but just for convenience, there it is. So get in touch with us. Happy to do a one-on-one with anybody here specifically about this, about something kind of related to this, or obviously about anything. That's what we're here for. So again, we're going to do more presentations. By the way, we are going to do a Medicare presentation probably in September this year. We don't have a date down on the calendar yet, but open enrollment for Medicare is October, so we like to do it around then. So that we'll get more into that Social Security Medicare kind of crossover there. One thing I could mention, because I have some personal experience with this. So when my mom turned 65, she was still working. So she had to decide whether she was going to sign up for Medicare or not. That was the first question. And she has coverage through work, so she didn't need to sign up for Medicare. But she met with a Medicare broker anyway, just to talk it out and, say, well, what would I do if I was going to do it? And this broker talked to her about, hey, you could turn on Medicare and you could turn on Social Security to pay for that Medicare. And she was telling me about this, and I was like, whoa. They want you to turn on your Social Security at 65 while you're still working? And she looked at me and was like, yeah, look how much more money I'd make. And I was like, yeah, but do you realize that your check's going to get reduced because you're still working and earning money while you're, under your full retirement age? And she was like, oh, they didn't talk to me about that. And I was like, well, they should have. Thank goodness I'm in this business so I could explain that to you. But I was like, definitely don't turn on your Social Security. So, there are people out there who are, I wouldn't say that this was a shady person, but I would say that they weren't thinking of the whole picture well enough, for example. I don't think there was ill intent there necessarily. I think it was just they hadn't put all the pieces together about the full situation. So anyway, that's my cautionary tale. Thankfully, I was able to step in because I knew the rules. But hey, if I had a different job, if I didn't know this stuff, who knows? We might have just taken their advice and done it, and that would have been a bad decision, I think. Sounds good. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next month here.